the ocean is asleep. It hums in long, low breaths that echo through coral caverns and soft dunes of sand. Each ripple moves slowly, as if it doesn't want to disturb the dreams of the deep. Bikini Bottom rests beneath the dark blue veil of the early hours, the kind of hour that lives between night and morning, when even time itself forgets to move. Inside the pineapple house, the light is dim and golden. A few bubbles rise from the sink, and the faint sound of dripping water marks the quiet rhythm of the sea. Everything is still, almost perfectly still, except for one gentle movement. On the living room floor, a small snail glides silently across the smooth tile. His name is Gary. The moonlight, filtered through wavy water, touches the edge of his shell, painting it in soft silver spirals. He moves without sound, leaving behind a faint glowing trail that catches the light like liquid glass. The world is asleep, but Gary is awake, not restless, just aware. He doesn't need to rush or think or speak. He simply exists in the quietest moment the ocean ever makes. He passes by SpongeBob's bed. The sponge is curled beneath his blanket, snoring softly, dreaming of jellyfish and laughter. Gary watches him for a moment, his eyes blinking slowly. A single bubble escapes SpongeBob's nose and floats upward, wobbling in the soft current before bursting silently against the ceiling. Gary tilts his head slightly as if amused. He loves SpongeBob in his own silent way, not with words, but with presence. Every morning, every night, he's there, watching, waiting, understanding more than anyone ever asked him to. He glides toward the window. Outside, the sea is dark and endless. There's no color yet, just shapes, faint outlines of coral, the quiet shimmer of sand, the slow dance of water through the currents. It's the kind of view that makes even the ocean seem like it's dreaming. Gary pauses by the window ledge. The light touches his eyes, and for a moment, they reflect the entire ocean back at him, two tiny mirrors holding infinity. He doesn't think of it as beauty. He doesn't think of it at all. He simply feels the stillness and understands it as truth. Silence, he knows, is never empty. It is full of tiny movements, tiny breaths, tiny thoughts that ripple through the world like unseen tides. In stillness, he can hear everything. The distant hum of the reef, the pulse of the sea itself, the echo of a whale song carried from miles away. Each sound is a slow note in a song that never ends. A bubble floats past his face. He watches it rise, twisting gently through the current until it fades into the darkness. To Gary, even that small movement has meaning. Nothing is wasted in silence. Nothing is without purpose. The ocean teaches him this every night. He moves again, tracing a path along the wall. The texture beneath him changes, a smooth patch of coral here, a grainy stretch of dried salt there. Every touch tells a story. Every surface has lived a life of its own. To most, these details would pass unnoticed, but to Gary, they're everything. The world speaks in whispers. He's one of the few who listen. Somewhere outside, a soft current stirs the sand. The motion sends a faint shimmer through the water, a wave of light that rolls across the window and over the snail's shell. The reflection looks like moonlight breathing, like the ocean itself has a heartbeat. Gary stops again. He lifts his eyes toward the ceiling. The house creaks faintly as the sea shifts around it. A soundless rhythm moves through the structure, a steady pulse of pressure and peace. He listens, not because he's curious, but because that's what he does best. He listens to everything the world says when no one else is awake to hear it. A clock ticks faintly from the kitchen, slow, watery, distant. Each second feels like a drop of time sinking into the deep. Gary can almost sense the space between the ticks, wide, open, calm. That's where he lives, in the space between things, between night and morning, between movement and stillness, between thought and understanding. He glides toward the kitchen, the trail of silver light following behind him, like a thread connecting him to every step he's ever taken. The floor is cool beneath him, the air thick and slow. The world feels like it's holding its breath. A single jellyfish drifts past the window, glowing faintly, pulsing with rhythm. Gary stops to watch it. The jellyfish doesn't move quickly. It simply drifts, surrendering itself to the current. It glows with quiet dignity, unaware of how beautiful it looks in the silence. Gary blinks once, slowly as if offering a greeting. The jellyfish pulses again and then fades into the dark. The snail moves on. He passes by the bookshelf where SpongeBob keeps his notes and doodles. The paper edges wave softly with the underwater motion. On one page, there's a scribbled drawing of Gary lopsided, smiling with "Best Pet Ever" written in bright crayon letters. Gary pauses there for a long while. He doesn't understand the words, not fully, but he understands the feeling. Love doesn't always need language. Sometimes it's enough to be seen. He turns away, continuing his slow journey through the sleeping home. The air feels warmer here, closer to SpongeBob's dreams. It carries a faint hum, a melody of memories, laughter, friendship, jellyfish nets, Krabby Patties, sizzling on the grill. Gary hears it all, not as sound, but as vibration, an echo of living things. He slides onto the rug. Its fibers ripple gently under his weight. He moves slower now, not out of tiredness, but reverence. This moment, this quiet, forgotten hour is sacred. It belongs to no one and everyone. The ocean outside, the creatures within, the still objects, they all share the same slow heartbeat. Gary looks again toward the window. The first hints of pale light begin to creep into the water. It isn't dawn yet, but the ocean knows it's coming. The current shifts almost imperceptibly, a subtle turning of time. The sand outside glows faintly, like stars waking from sleep. The snail blinks again, slowly. He can feel the morning approaching, not as brightness, but as balance. The deep blue will soon fade into turquoise. The silence will give way to small sounds of life, and the world will begin to move again. But for now, this stillness belongs to him, and in it, he feels infinite. He closes his eyes for a moment. If he dreams, it's not of motion or adventure. It's of this, the quiet hum of water, the slow drift of light, the peace that lives beneath the noise. In this stillness, Gary finds something the rest of Bikini Bottom never seems to notice. The wisdom is not loud. It's the sound of nothing speaking softly. He opens his eyes again. The bubbles from the sink rise slower now. The light bends differently across the walls. Something changes, not around him, but within him. A calm thought drifts through his mind, wordless yet clear. Everything that matters moves slowly. And with that, he continues to glide through the half-lit home, leaving his silver trail across the floor, a quiet map of peace that no one will ever see, but somehow everyone will feel. Gary moves toward the small archway that leads to the kitchen. The soft current of the ocean flows through the window cracks, carrying the faint scent of salt and morning coral. The refrigerator hums in a low tone, steady and rhythmic, like the ocean's own heartbeat echoing within the walls. To Gary, even this small sound feels alive. He glides closer, listening. Every sound has a story. Every vibration is a pulse in the great body of the sea. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the lazy sway of SpongeBob's hanging spatula, all of it moves in quiet harmony. Gary's antennae twitch slightly as he senses each layer of the underwater music. He feels the calm between notes, the space where meaning lives. That space, to him, is the language of the ocean. He passes a small bowl resting on the table. It's empty, except for one faint trace of snail food dust left from yesterday. He doesn't stop to eat. He isn't hungry for anything right now. He's hungry only for quiet, for presence, for the slow unfolding of another silent hour. A single droplet of water slides down the side of the bowl and lands with a soft plink. Gary watches it spread across the surface, widening into a tiny, perfect circle. That's how thoughts move, he thinks, slow, simple, rippling outward until they touch everything. He doesn't need to chase the thought. He lets it float, fade, and dissolve like the drop itself. He moves past the chair legs and into the center of the kitchen. The water here feels slightly cooler, drifting from the open window above the sink. Beyond it, the ocean stirs. The world outside is beginning to breathe again. Not loud, not awake, just aware. The coral trees sway gently in the distance. A cloud of sand rises, drifts, then settles again. Every motion happens slowly, gracefully. The sea in its own way is teaching him patience all over again. Gary climbs up the side of the counter. It takes him time, but time doesn't bother him. Each inch feels like a small meditation. The surface beneath him is cool, smooth, and slightly damp. He can see tiny bubbles trapped inside the surface of the coral counter, frozen breaths of air, still and shining. They remind him of memories, trapped moments, unmoving, yet full of light. When he reaches the top, he pauses. From here, he can see more of the house, the gentle curve of the living room, the soft shadows cast by SpongeBob's lamp, the golden outlines of objects resting peacefully. Everything has shape, texture, silence. He studies them all with the patient eyes of someone who doesn't need time to pass to feel content. A soft swirl of light filters through the water, bending across the window and landing on the floor. It moves like a slow heartbeat, expanding, contracting, glowing, fading. Gary tilts his eyes toward it. He can almost feel it pulse through his shell. It's not just light, it's a rhythm. The rhythm of everything connected, from the smallest grain of sand to the deepest trench of the ocean. A bubble pops against the window, startling a nearby sea worm. The worm retreats into the sand. Gary watches quietly. He doesn't flinch. He understands even fear moves slowly in the deep, carried by the tide until it finds stillness again. He begins his descent down the counter's edge. The trail he leaves behind glistens like a thin stream of moonlight. He's not aware of beauty in the way others might be, but beauty follows him, nonetheless, in every deliberate movement, in every pause between breaths. That's the secret of the sea. The slower you go, the more alive everything becomes. He returns to the floor, crossing over SpongeBob's rug once more. The fibers sway in slow motion. They whisper softly when he passes, a rustling like distant seagrass. To Gary, that whisper is as comforting as a lullaby. It tells him the world is still safe, still gentle, still held together by quiet purpose. He moves toward the front door now. The space around it glows faintly blue from the moonlight outside. A shadow drifts across a jellyfish again. Maybe the same one. Maybe another. They move in groups sometimes, and even in their togetherness, they seem alone. Gary understands that too. Together or alone, it doesn't matter. Silence is the same in every form. He stops at the base of the door, feeling the shift in water temperature. Outside is colder, wider, endless. He can sense the current pressing softly against the door, urging him to come out, to see the sleeping city. He doesn't rush to open it. He just listens for a while. The water beyond hums like a low song. It moves through the coral hills and over the sandy roads. It brushes past Squidward's house, hums under Patrick's Rock, and sighs around the tall spine of the Krusty Krab sign. Every building, every shell, every grain of sand plays its part in the great, quiet symphony of the sea. And Gary, in his stillness, is part of it too. He lowers his head, pressing lightly against the base of the door, and feels the vibration travel through his shell. It's like the whole world is whispering secrets in a language that only silence understands. He slowly pushes the door open. A soft stream of bubbles escapes, shimmering like a slow exhale. Outside, the seafloor glows faintly under the thin, filtered moonlight. The coral structures breathe gently, their edges lined with tiny points of luminescence. The sand moves like liquid glass beneath the steady pull of the tide. Gary pauses on the threshold, half inside, half outside. The water feels wider here, deeper, older. It carries the scent of salt and life and forgotten things. He stretches his eyes on their stalks, taking in the horizon. The shapes of the reef rise like sleeping giants in the distance. Above them, the surface glows in soft ribbons of blue and silver. He glides forward, slow and deliberate. Each movement leaves a delicate shimmer in his wake. He doesn't think of where he's going, only that he's going there slowly. Every inch matters. Every ripple counts. In his quiet way, Gary knows something most never learn. There is no such thing as a small journey. He a cluster of seagrass, brushing gently against it. Tiny particles lift into the water and drift away like dust made of light. The plants sway, whispering again in their soft, rhythmic language. Gary doesn't speak back, he only listens. He's learned that listening is the truest form of conversation. The ocean around him grows slightly brighter. Somewhere far away, the edge of dawn begins to glow, though it will take time to reach this depth. Time, though, is not something Gary minds. He lives inside it, unbothered, unmeasured. Every second feels full enough to last forever. A soft current brushes past him, carrying the faint scent of the open sea, the kind of smell that feels like memory. He breathes it in without lungs, just through being, through feeling. And as he moves further into the quiet world outside, the pineapple house fades behind him, becoming just another glowing shape in the great blue stillness. He is alone now, but he does not feel lonely. The ocean itself feels alive beside him, within him, around him. It hums a single note, deep, calm, endless. And Gary, the silent snail, hums with it, perfectly in tune. Outside, the water feels vast, cool, clear, alive yet calm, like the whole sea is holding its breath. Gary slides across the sand, each movement a small wave of silver light. The ground beneath him hums softly with the pulse of the tide. It's not loud. It's not sharp. It's the kind of sound you don't hear, you feel. He pauses beside a small coral rock near the base of the pineapple. Tiny bubbles cling to its edges, trembling gently in the dim light. A few strands of seaweed sway back and forth, brushing the rock's surface like fingers tracing an old memory. Gary watches the motion, slow, repetitive, peaceful. I don't need to move yet. Stillness to him isn't something to escape. It's a home he carries wherever he goes. The faint glow from SpongeBob's window drifts outward, painting a golden blur on the sand. He looks back once, a quiet glance, nothing more. Inside, SpongeBob sleeps, dreaming brightly in the soft hum of the night. Gary's trail gleams faintly in the light, a thin ribbon stretching from the doorway to where he now rests. It looks like moonlight trying to remember its way home. He turns again toward the open sea. Bikini Bottom stretches before him, hushed and drowsy. The streets are empty. No boats move, no laughter echoes. No bubbles rise from the Krusty Krab chimney. Even the jellyfish fields in the distance look frozen, the creatures drifting as if caught in their own dreams. The only sound is the soft, deep whisper of the current brushing through coral arches and seashell fences. Gary glides forward, his eyes slowly turning as he scans the quiet world around him. Every shadow feels gentle. Every shape hums with life, even in rest. A starfish clings to a nearby rock, its arms faintly pulsing with sleepy rhythm. A small school of fish passes overhead, not swimming fast, not fleeing, just moving because movement is what life does. They shimmer once and fade into the dark like thoughts dissolving in the mind. The sand beneath Gary's path is soft and fine. Each grain catches the faint light and releases it like a sigh. He can feel the subtle shift of the earth beneath him, the slow bending of time. It feels endless, like walking through the quiet edge of a dream. As he passes the street corner, he notices a bottle half buried in sand. It's old, maybe washed in from far away. Its glass is smooth, clouded with salt and age. Gary circles it once. Inside, a single air bubble floats, trapped and still. He watches it, curious but calm. Even trapped, the bubble reflects the soft blue glow of the ocean, a little world within a world. He moves on, leaving it behind, knowing everything finds its place eventually. He continues down the empty road. The coral houses curve in gentle shapes, casting long shadows across the sand. Each window holds a soft, light, faint glows of dreams still happening inside. Patrick's Rock rests quietly, a small mound rising from the sand like a slow heartbeat. Gary moves closer. He can hear the faint, rhythmic sound of Patrick's snoring, muffled through layers of sand and shell. The sound rolls in slow waves, deep and comforting, matching the rhythm of the ocean outside. Gary stops near the base of Patrick's Rock. The sand here is warm from the faint glow of a nearby lava coral. He settles for a moment, letting the warmth travel through his shell. The water carries whispers of Patrick's dream-soft, fuzzy echoes of laughter, of floating jellyfish, of food. Gary listens quietly, not to understand, but to feel the comfort of someone else's peace. The ocean above them shimmers faintly as a cloud of plankton drifts past. Their light falls in slow motion, speckling the sand with tiny stars. Gary blinks once, slowly. He can feel the quiet magic of it, thousands of lives glowing softly in the darks, unaware of how beautiful they are. He wonders if he were one of them, would he know his own light? He doesn't think so. He doesn't need to. It's enough to glow and not know why. He begins moving again past Patrick's home and towards Squidward's tall stone house. It stands motionless, proud even in its sleep. The doorway is shut tight, but the faintest hum comes from inside Squidward's clarinet, resting on a chair, still vibrating from a note played hours ago. The sound is almost gone now, but not entirely. It lingers in the air like a memory that refuses to leave. Gary tilts his eyes toward it, feeling the last ripple of its tone fade into the ocean's breath. Even silence, he thinks, has an aftersound. The current shifts slightly. The sea begins to move more freely, preparing itself for dawn. A soft wind, or what counts as wind underwater, drifts through the coral, stirring tiny flakes of sand into swirling patterns. Fall around Gary, shining briefly before fading into stillness again. He moves through them, slow as time, patient as the sea. Ahead, the crusty crab looms faintly through the dim light. Its sign creaks softly, rocking in the current. The words glow faintly, the neon edges flickering like tired eyes. Gary stops a few feet away. He has no reason to go inside, but he looks at it anyway. This is where SpongeBob spends most of his days cooking, laughing, filling the ocean with life and sound. Now, in the early silence, the place feels like it's exhaling, peaceful, empty, as if the building itself is dreaming. The snail lingers there, staring at the faint glow until it feels like part of the ocean's natural light. He can almost imagine the sounds that usually fill this place, the sizzling of the grill, the chatter of customers, the clink of coins. Now there's none of it, only the soft hum of water against wood, the creak of the roof beams, the far-off sigh of a sleeping sea. A bubble floats past him, then another. They rise together, twist, and drift toward the surface. Gary watches them until they disappear into the deep, where the moonlight bends and dissolves. He thinks in his own silent way how strange it is that bubbles never stay. They always rise, always vanish, and yet they always return. The ocean never forgets their shape. It just keeps making more. He moves again, slower now. Each glide feels like a heartbeat. He passes under the crusty crab sign, letting his trail glint across the coral foundation. Above him, a jellyfish passes once more, perhaps the same as before. Perhaps not. It doesn't matter. Every shape in the ocean repeats, yet every moment feels new. That's the wisdom of the deep repetition that never grows old. Gary continues along the sand road, heading toward the coral hills that mark the edge of Bikini Bottom. The faint glow of dawn begins to bloom behind him. He doesn't look back. He doesn't need to. He can feel it, the world waking up slowly, stretching through the water like a giant creature coming alive. The sea hums low and long. The coral sways, the sand breathes, and the gliding quiet, unhurried, eternal. The sand road thins into a pale ridge of coral that winds toward the open sea. Gary pauses at its base. The ridge is smooth, worn by years of waves and drifting sand. Tiny shells sparkle along its edge, catching the soft pulse of blue light that seeps from above. He begins to climb. Every inch is deliberate. The surface feels cool beneath his body, and the faint hum of the ocean vibrates through the stone. He can feel the world moving, not fast, not loud, just moving. Everything that exists breathes together. The current, the coral, the fish sleeping in their caves, even the sand grains rolling softly under his weight. All of it in rhythm. All of it in stillness. Halfway up, he stops to rest. Below him, Bikini Bottom lies like a dream. SpongeBob's pineapple glows dimly in the distance, surrounded by shadowed coral gardens. Patrick's rock rises like a small moon, quiet and content. Squidward's house stands perfectly still, tall and gray against the drifting blue. The Krusty Krab rests beyond them, its roof swaying gently, its sign whispering to the current. To Gary, it all looks peaceful, like the world has exhaled and forgotten to breathe in again. He moves again, higher now. The ridge curves toward an open shelf of stone that overlooks the deep. The water changes color here, darker below, lighter above, a slow gradient from indigo to pale teal. Tiny fish stir within the coral, blinking awake before settling again. No one hurries. The ocean does not allow haste at this hour. When Gary reaches the top, he stops completely. He doesn't move. He simply rests on the cool coral and looks out at the end. The horizon is faint, a soft line where light and shadow meet. The first thread of dawn begins to appear thin, distant, trembling. It spreads slowly like a secret cold sea. Gary's eyes widen just a little. He watches as the color shifts, deep blue melting into silver, silver into soft gold. The light filters through the water in long ribbons, twisting, bending, rippling over coral peaks. Each ray moves like a gentle hand brushing through silk. It touches everything, the rocks, the sand, the smallest shells, and everything glows back. The snail feels the warmth spread across his shell. It isn't strong yet, just a whisper of the coming day. But it feels ancient, a rhythm older than any creature that has ever lived here. He listens to it, the way only he can. The light hums in a sound too low for words, a deep, vibrating tone that fills the water like the ocean's heartbeat awakening. He closes his eyes. He doesn't think of morning as an ending or a beginning. To him, it's simply another moment of stillness changing its color. Another reminder that the world moves in circles, not lines. Night folds into day, and someday day will fold into night again. Everything returns, everything ends endlessly soft. A small bubble escapes from the coral beneath him and drifts upward. Gary opens his eyes just in time to see it rise. He follows it with his gaze as it moves higher, shrinking as it climbs. It reflects the growing light, turning gold, then white, then gone. He wonders where bubbles go when they leave. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere. A soft current brushes across the ledge, stirring bits of shell dust into the water. The particles swirl in delicate spirals, glittering like tiny galaxies. Gary remains perfectly still in the middle of them. They move around him, not against him, as though the ocean recognizes him a part of itself, not separate, not intruding. He is both motionless and moving, both waiting and arriving. This is what wisdom feels like in the sea, not knowing, not speaking, just existing quietly among infinite things. Down below, the shapes of the town begin to shift. Lights flicker on inside SpongeBob's house. A curtain sways in Squidward's window. The faintest sound, a yawn, a cough, a sleepy clatter drifts upward through the water. Life is returning, carefully, slowly. The spell of night loosens its hold. Gary doesn't rush back. He stays on the ridge, watching the transformation. The water brightens, colors bloom. Red coral turns crimson again. Green kelp waves like soft fabric in the current. Pink sand gleams as if blushing under the newborn light. He can see everything now, clearly the streets, the rocks, the quiet creatures that had hidden through the night. The world hasn't changed, yet it feels new. He glides forward to the very edge of the coral shelf and peers down. Far below, the seafloor falls away into a vast blue canyon. It's dark there still, untouched by dawn. But he knows light will reach it soon enough. Everything gets its turn. That's how the ocean works, slowly, kindly, patiently. The current picks up slightly. It passes around him, lifting tiny shells and carrying them outward. He lets it move him a little, not resisting. He allows the flow to guide his path, trusting it the way the tide trusts the moon. There's a softness in surrender, a calm that comes from letting the world lead. He feels that calm now deep in his shell, deep in the quiet place where thought ends and begins. As the light grows brighter, the shadows shorten. The coral sparkles. A small group of jellyfish drift across the horizon, glowing like floating lanterns. They pulse in unison, their tendrils trailing like ribbons of light. Gary watches them for a long time. They remind him of dreams, slow, luminous, ungraspable. He doesn't chase them. He simply admires their rhythm until they fade into the brightening water. Then he turns slowly back toward Bikini Bottom. His trail glimmers faintly on the coral, shining silver in the morning light. The world around him hums again, gentle sounds of waking life. A clamshell closes softly into the distance. A seahorse shakes sand from its mane. A bubble bursts against a coral branch, releasing a quiet pop that sounds like a greeting. Every tiny sound feels sacred. Every motion feels new. Gary descends the ridge with care. The warmth of dawn follows him downward, brushing the edge of his shell. The closer he comes to the ground, the brighter the world becomes. The water fills with golden dust, floating, swirling, glowing. It looks like morning has broken into 1,000 little pieces, scattered through the sea. At the bottom of the ridge, he pauses once more. The path home stretches ahead, a soft trail of silver winding through coral and shadow. He looks back briefly at the horizon. The sun's light now fully touches the upper water, spilling down like liquid honey. It ripples through the currents, bending, shimmering, filling the deep with warmth. Gary blinks slowly. He feels no hurry, no need to capture the moment. He knows it will come again tomorrow and the day after that. The world turns without trying. All he must do is be here to see it. He begins his glide home. His shell gleams with morning colors, pinks, golds, faint blues, each hue shifting with the movement of the sea. As he moves, the world stirs awake around him. A crab emerging from its burrow, a small bubble, from SpongeBob's chimney, the gentle sway of kelp against coral walls. Everything alive, everything soft. By the time he reaches the edge of the pineapple house, the ocean is bright. The darkness has dissolved completely, replaced by the clear shimmer of day. He slides across the familiar sand, leaving one last silver thread behind him, a trail of night's calm preserved in the light. He pauses at the door. The hum of the home greets him like an old friend. Inside, he can already hear SpongeBob stirring. A sleepy yawn, a creak of the bed, the soft mumble of a dream fading away. Gary stays by the door a moment longer, listening. The sounds of life fill the house again. The stillness has ended, but it hasn't disappeared. It has simply changed shape, folded itself into the rhythm of the day. He slides quietly back inside. The light follows him through the doorway, scattering across the floor. The trail he left in the night glimmers faintly, connecting darkness to dawn. He moves toward his resting spot near SpongeBob's bed, curling softly against the sand. The water feels warmer now, and gentle currents move through the house like sighs of comfort. Gary's eyes blink once, then twice. He watches the golden dust settle around him. The world outside is awake, bright, and busy again. But within him, the stillness remains deep, patient, endless. He closes his eyes and breathes the silence inward, letting it rest beneath his shell like a quiet secret. The ocean hums its morning song. The light sways across the floor. And Gary, the silent snail, rests in the calm between moments. The last keeper of the night's peace, the first listener to the dawn. The morning light in Bikini Bottom is soft and slow, spilling over the sand like honey. The world is awake now, yet it does not feel hurried. The sea has its own way of waking quietly, gracefully, without alarm. Every creature seems to move in a rhythm that belongs to the water itself. Gary stirs from his resting place beneath SpongeBob's bed. He doesn't rush to move. Instead, he listens. He listens to the hum of the home, to the soft creak of the pineapple's walls, to SpongeBob humming a cheerful tune as he prepares for the day. There's warmth in the sound, familiar, gentle, and constant, like the first bubble that rises from a coral reef after night has ended. He blinks once, twice, and begins his slow crawl toward the open window. The light filters in, golden and calm, and dances across the floor in watery shapes. He pauses halfway, letting it touch his shell. It feels like time itself has slowed, just for him. The warmth spreads through him, not urging him to move, not pushing him forward, just inviting him to be. Patience, Gary thinks, is not about waiting. It is about living at the right speed. The world around him, the fish darting by, the bubbles floating upward, all seem to rush without seeing. But Gary sees everything. He sees how each bubble shimmers differently, how every grain of sand rolls with its own tiny rhythm. He notices the flicker of light on the SpongeBob's kitchen spatula, the soft swirl of salt that hangs in the air. To move slowly is to see deeply. He reaches the window and peers outside. The streets of Bikini Bottom glow beneath the morning sunbeams. SpongeBob skips past, cheerful as ever, ready for another day at the Krusty Krab. Patrick snores gently under his rock, and Squidward is already frowning at the sound of morning. Oh, the jellyfish drift lazily across jellyfish fields, pulsing in sleepy circles. Everything seems to be in motion, yet the ocean keeps its silence. Gary decides to leave the house. He slides down the coral step, his shell glinting faintly in the light. The sand greets him with a soft crunch beneath his trail. He doesn't know where he's going. He rarely does. His journey is not about direction, but experience. Each inch of travel is its own destination. He glides past SpongeBob's garden, where the kelp leaves sway slowly in the current. Small sea butterflies flit through them, wings flashing like glass. Gary watches one land on a petal, stay a moment, and lift again. Even its flight is unhurried, not aimless, but peaceful. The snail follows it with his eyes until it disappears into the coral shadows. Patience, he thinks again, is not the act of waiting for something to come. It is knowing that what is meant to come is already on its way. The sea does not rush to meet the tide, it simply moves with it. The coral does not demand the light it waits, and the light arrives. The current never argues with the stone it flows around it. Everything in the ocean seems to understand the simple truth. Time is not something to conquer. It is something to share. Gary continues along the sandy path that winds through the outskirts of Bikini Bottom. Here the sounds of the town fade into quiet murmurs. The water feels cooler, clearer. A small reef rises ahead, painted in soft colors, pale blue, rose, gold. Tiny fish weave in and out of it like drifting thoughts. Gary stops and watches the way they move, not straight, not in haste, but in circles, small spirals of motion that seem to dance with the current itself. It reminds him of how he travels, slow, curved, steady. He inches forward, feeling the grainy sand beneath him. Each touch is part of a pattern, a rhythm the sea writes on his path. His silver trail gleams behind him, marking where he has been, like quiet proof that patience leaves beauty behind. Every slow motion creates something lasting. Above him, the light bends through the water. It breaks into patterns, flowing across the coral and sand like gentle waves of glass. Gary pauses beneath a strand of seagrass. He can see his reflection in the tiny air bubble caught there, distorted, rippling, soft. He leans closer, watching the image move as the bubble trembles. He doesn't see himself as others might. Not small, not simple. He sees a part of the sea's design. Every ripple, every mark, every trail all belong. A crab scuttles past him, fast and fidgety, muttering to itself about time. Too much to do today, the crab says under its breath. Too many shells to polish, too many bubbles to count. It hurries by without looking at him. Gary watches quietly as the crab disappears around the coral. Then he blinks once, slowly. There is no such thing as too much to do when every moment is already full. The crab's rush does not disturb him. It simply reminds him of what he has chosen to leave behind. He continues, gliding over the path as the current shifts softly around him. Somewhere above, a faint shimmer of bubbles rise like silver threads. They break and reform, each one a tiny world of light. He follows their ascent with his gaze, knowing they'll never hurry, never worry. They simply rise because that is what they do. The sand grows finer beneath him as he moves further from town. He can feel the coolness deepen, the sound of life quieting behind him. Each step forward feels slower, heavier, but not difficult. It's the kind of slowness that invites peace, a reminder that stillness is not the absence of movement, but the perfection of it. The current, the light, his breath all aligned. Ahead, the reef opens into a small clearing surrounded by tall seaweed walls. The water here is still and blue-green, caught between shadow and light. He enters, his trail curling behind like a soft ribbon. The silence in this place feels different, deeper, older. It hums in a low tone that only creatures who live without hurry can hear. Gary stops in the center and listens. The world outside fades, leaving only the soft whisper of water against sand. This is where patience lives. Not in waiting for things to change, but in learning to exist without needing them to. The seaweed sways slowly. The bubbles rise without thought. And Gary the Snail rests in the middle of it all, perfectly still, perfectly alive. He takes one quiet breath. The kind of breath that does not fill or empty, but simply continues, a breath of being. And the ocean answers in silence. The clearing hums quietly around Gary, the faint vibration of life that never rushes, never forces itself forward. He can feel it through his shell like a song too ancient for words. He lets it soak in, steady and calm, till it feels like the sea and his heartbeat are the same thing. After a long moment, he begins to move again, one slow glide forward, then another. Each motion leaves a faint silver trail that gleams softly in the dim light. There is no destination, no goal to reach. He simply follows the curve of the current, the way the sand seems to invite him onward. As he travels deeper into the quiet reef, the colors change. The soft golds of morning fade into blue-green shades that feel almost dreamlike. Long strands of kelp hang like curtains, brushing against his shell as he passes. Each touch is gentle, the sea greeting him, not stopping him. The light above filters through them in ribbons, bending and rippling like time itself. A school of tiny silver fish drifts by, moving together like a thought forming in the ocean's mind. Gary watches them for a while. They never bump into one another, never break their rhythm. Each fish knows where to go because none of them rush. Their patience is in their unity. They move together because they trust the current more than control. Gary thinks about that as he continues. Patience, he realizes, is not only about stillness, it is also about trust. The coral grows slowly, the tides rise and fall, the shells gather layer upon layer across years of waiting. Every living thing trusts the rhythm of time. Nothing demands that the ocean hurry, and because of that, the sea never loses its peace. He passes beneath an arch of coral where the water grows cooler and stiller. Tiny bubbles cling to the underside, trembling gently with each current. Gary pauses beneath them, watching their fragile shapes shimmer. They remind him of thoughts appearing, rising and disappearing when the time comes. He doesn't chase them, doesn't wish to hold them. He simply observes, letting them rise at their own pace. Somewhere beyond the arch, a faint tapping sound echoes. It's soft but rhythmic, steady as a clock tick. Gary follows it, curious but unhurried. The sound grows clearer, tap, 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 like a message being written by the sea itself. When he finally reaches the source, he finds an old hermit crab working on its shell. The crab is carefully polishing the edges with a piece of coral, each motion patient and deliberate. Gary watches from a short distance, saying nothing, just listening to the rhythm of the crab's task. The crab glances up for a moment and chuckles softly. "Ah, a quiet one," it says, its voice like gravel rubbed by the tide. "You move slowly, little snail. That's good. Most of the ocean forgets how to move slow." Gary blinks once, acknowledging, and continues to watch. The crab resumes its polishing, explaining as it works. "This shell took me years to find. Cracked, broken, battered by storms. But with time, everything smooths. You see, the sea teaches us that even rough things become soft if we let the current work long enough. It holds the shell to the light, showing its new shine." Gary tilts his head slightly. The shell glows faintly, its scars no longer sharp, but beautiful reminders of endurance. The crab continues. Patience isn't about standing still. It's about knowing that every moment does its part. A wave, a grain of sand, a gentle current, each one changes the world, little by little. Gary listens deeply. He feels those words settle in him like warm water. The idea that every moment, no matter how quiet, carries purpose, that even slow lives shape the sea. The crab finishes polishing and sets its coral tool aside. Now, it says softly, I wait. The ocean will finish what I started. It smiles and turns away, leaving its shell to rest in the sunlit water. Gary watches as the light glides over it, shimmering gently. The process is complete only because it isn't forced. He glides onward, carrying the thought with him. Sometimes doing nothing is not laziness, it's trust. It's letting the sea breathe for you when you're tired. It's letting time do what time is best at, healing. As he moves away from the clearing, the water deepens into a faint turquoise. He passes small coral spires that stand like sentinels in the current. Each one has taken centuries to grow, shaping themselves around whatever obstacles the ocean placed before them. None of them look perfect, yet each feels balanced, shaped by patience, not design. Gary stops beside one particularly large coral, its surface marked by hundreds of tiny shells. They sparkle like stars scattered across the reef. He touches one gently with his feelers, feeling the smoothness of its surface. It must have taken countless tides to make it this way, soft, curved, polished by years of motion. The coral, without effort, teaches him another kind of patience, the patience of becoming. The current shifts slightly, sending a faint hum through the reef. Gary feels it vibrate under him, gentle and low, like the heartbeat of the sea. He closes his eyes, letting the sound pass through him. The hum reminds him of the nights when SpongeBob hums softly in his sleep, that same deep rhythm of care without urgency. When he opens his eyes again, he sees a sea feather drifting downward from above. It moves slowly, tumbling in spirals, never hurrying, never falling straight. It lands beside him in the sand, delicate as breath. Gary lowers his head, studying its fine lines. Even in its descent, the feather had grace. The sea took its time carrying it here, and the feather trusted the water completely. He begins moving again, his trail curling like soft handwriting on the sand. The reef opens wider, and faint rays of light begin to filter down from above. The shimmer feels like the ocean's slow applause, the quiet reward of movement done gently. He pauses at the top of a sandy ridge, looking back over the path he's taken. His trail glows faintly in the dim light, twisting through coral shadows like a silver river. Each curve, each stop, each patient turn tells a small story of presence. He realizes he's come far, yet feels no fatigue. When every step is lived fully, distance loses its meaning. He breathes softly, or something like it, as the ocean flows around him. The moment feels wide and infinite. The sea doesn't ask him where he's going, only if he's here. And he is, entirely. Gary glides down from the sandy ridge, the current carrying him gently toward a darker patch of water below. It's cooler here, quieter too. The sound of distant bubbles fades, replaced by a low, steady pulse, like the sea breathing through its sleep. He doesn't resist the pull. He lets the water lead. The light dims slowly, the coral thinning, until only smooth stone remains. A narrow opening appears ahead, shaped like a crescent moon. The current flows in and out of it in long, patient sighs. Each breath of water pulls grains of sand forward, then releases them again, endless motion, endlessly calm. Gary pauses at the edge. He feels the rhythm of the place before entering. In, out. Pull, release. The ocean's lungs. He slides inside. The water temperature drops slightly, cool against his shell. The walls glimmer faintly with traces of mica, reflecting fragments of light from the entrance. Deeper in, the sound of the tide becomes music, soft, resonant, eternal. It echoes in the chamber, rising and falling in slow waves that seem to match the pace of thought itself. Gary follows the sound to its center. Here, the floor of the cave dips into a shallow pool that glows from beneath a faint, blue-white shimmer like moonlight caught underwater. He moves to the edge and watches the reflection ripple. It looks like the stars have sunk into the sea and are resting here for a while. He lowers himself slowly into the pool. The glow ripples outward, circling him in expanding rings of light. It feels like stepping into silence itself, a silence that moves, that breathes. He doesn't try to think. He simply lets the water carry its rhythm through him. The cave inhales, and the tide rises slightly. It exhales, and the tide recedes. Each motion is gentle, constant, infinite. Gary realizes that this is patience in its purest form, the patience of the tide. It doesn't fight the moon's pull. It doesn't demand stillness. It retreats only to return. It waits not in stillness, but in certainty. To be patient, he thinks, is to trust that every low tide brings another high. He glides deeper into the pool, his silver trail glinting faintly against the glowing floor. Tiny air bubbles cling to the stone around him, shimmering like tiny lanterns. They rise, pop, and reform without sound. Their disappearance does not feel like loss, only transformation. Everything that leaves the sea becomes part of it again. He pauses at the far wall of the chamber. The stone is covered in soft green moss, swaying slightly in the current. He brushes it gently with his feelers. It feels alive, not restless, but completely surrendered to the water's rhythm. The moss moves when the tide moves, rests when the tide rests. It never resists, and yet it never loses itself. Gary lingers beside it, feeling the lesson unfold. The seaweed and moss do not hurry to grow. They do not compete or grasp. They accept both stillness and motion as the same thing, different notes in the same song. Maybe that's what patience really means, not waiting for calm, but being calm even in motion. The cave breathes again, and a faint shimmer passes through the water. The glow brightens for a heartbeat. Gary looks toward the entrance, where the light from outside flickers faintly. The tide must be shifting, the ocean drawing back. He watches how the cave accepts it, the pull, the emptiness, the slow exhale. Nothing in the stone panics. Nothing clings. Everything lets go. He thinks of SpongeBob's mornings, how his friend wakes with energy and hope, never noticing how much the world slows around him. Gary doesn't mind. He knows that stillness and excitement belong to the same day. Patience doesn't mean still water. It means steady water. Even waves have peace when they move in rhythm. He turns slightly, tracing a circle in the sand with his trail. The glowing water moves over it, erasing the mark almost instantly. He smiles inwardly. Even his trace is not meant to last. The sea is always rewriting itself. And maybe that's all life really is, small, beautiful marks made by living slowly enough to notice. The tide breathes again, stronger now. The water around him stirs, swirling softly. Bubbles rise from the pool's center, carrying flecks of glowing sand upward. They spiral around him, turning in slow motion like galaxies made of light. He remains still in the middle of them, the ocean's quiet axis. Each bubble bursts gently against his shell, leaving a tiny shimmer before disappearing. The rhythm of creation and release. Oh, he listens to the echoes. They sound almost like a heartbeat, slow, steady, unhurried. The cave's pulse, the sea's memory. He wonders how long it's been breathing like this. Centuries, maybe. Long before Bikini Bottom existed. Long before snails or pineapples or Krabby Patties. The patience of time itself wrapped in salt water and light. Gary stays until the tide begins to rise again. He can feel the shift in pressure, a subtle swelling that fills the chamber with new energy. The sound deepens, like the ocean sighing in its sleep. He knows it's time to leave. Patience is not staying forever, it's knowing when to move. The sea begins to open again. The water grows warmer, thinner, as Gary drifts toward the edge of Bikini Bottom, the place where the reef fades into the soft slopes of the sand fields. Here, the world looks simple. No coral towers, no glimmering algae, just vast, rippling dunes of pale gold that stretch as far as the eye can see. It's the quietest part of the ocean, a place where sound feels like it has to tiptoe. Gary pauses at the edge of this open world. The current slows, then settles. Tiny grains of sand swirl upward with each of his movements, catching the faint light and falling again like gentle snow. He feels the shift beneath him, how every ripple he creates changes the entire surface. Even the smallest slide of his shell leaves a trail that the current instantly begins to erase. It's humbling, this quiet impermanence. He realizes that the sand is always rewriting itself endlessly, reshaping, smoothing, returning. No mark truly stays for long, and yet each one matters for a moment. Each line tells a brief story before it disappears. He begins to glide forward, slow as a drifting leaf. The sand hums under his weight, a soft, whispering sound that rises and fades with each movement. It's not music, not exactly, but something close. A deep, rhythmic murmur that only those who move slowly enough can hear. Gary listens. The ocean above him feels still, yet he can sense life everywhere beneath the sand. Tiny crabs, sleeping clams, burrowed worms that twist and breathe in darkness. The ground itself is alive, turning over quietly, grain by grain. He thinks even the sand is patient. It never clings to what was. He stops beside a small ridge where the tide has formed a delicate pattern, a swirl like the curl of a fingerprint. He looks closer, and the design seems to move, shifting slightly, reshaped by every faint touch of the current. It reminds him of something, maybe the way thoughts shift in SpongeBob's mind as he dreams, changing shape but never truly disappearing. The sand does the same. It forgets, but not completely. Gary presses gently into the ridge. His shell leaves a small imprint, an oval shadow surrounded by glowing dust. For a few seconds, it looks permanent, like something carved. Then a small ripple passes through, and it fades away. He watches it vanish without sadness. This is how the ocean remembers, not through holding, but through letting go. He moves further across the dunes. The landscape rises and dips in quiet waves, each one a silent echo of the sea above. He can almost feel the memory of motion, stored in every curve. He glides up one small hill, then down the other side, feeling the world beneath him breathe. The deeper he moves into the sand fields, the more it feels like time itself is slowing. In the distance, he sees the faint outline of a coral fragment, half buried in the sand. It's bleached white, worn smooth by years of current and salt. He moves toward it, drawn by curiosity. Up close, he can see the faint etchings still carved into its surface patterns, left by creatures long gone. Tiny holes, small grooves, faint spirals. Every mark a memory, every curve a trace of something once alive. He slides around it, studying the lines with patient eyes. The coral doesn't speak, but Gary feels its quiet story of a reef that once stood tall, filled with color and movement, of the slow crumble and fall as the current wore it down, of how even now, as a remnant buried in sand, it still catches light in soft glimmers. Nothing truly disappears. It just changes form, becomes smaller, quieter, like whispers fading into the hum of the sea. He brushes against the coral, and a faint shimmer rises, disturbed grains of sand swirling up in a tiny cloud. Inside that cloud, the light bends and flickers, painting small stars in the water. Gary watches the particles fall again, each one finding its place in the soft ground below. It feels like a quiet cycle of remembering and releasing a rhythm, too patient for words. Far above, a shadow drifts across the light, a jellyfish passing silently, glowing with soft pink light. Its reflection dances on the sand, faint but clear. Gary watches the pattern move across the dunes, then fade as the jellyfish glides away. The sand accepts the shadow as it accepts everything else briefly, completely, and then lets it go. Gary continues onward, following no path, letting the soft ground decide where he should move. Sometimes he slides up against small mounds where seagrass grows in quiet tufts, waving slowly. Tiny bubbles cling to the tips of the blades, shining like pearls before floating upward. He passes through them, and for a moment, the air shimmers around him like golden dust. He doesn't think in words, but the feeling inside him grows clearer with every slow movement. The sand isn't empty. It's full of lessons too soft to shout. Every grain has been somewhere at the bottom of a trench, on the edge of a reef, or carried through storms. Each one has been broken and remade countless times. And yet together, they make something whole. Something vast, gentle, and forgiving. Gary stops again, sinking slightly into the soft surface. He feels the sand hold him, not tightly, but like water holds a floating leaf. He lets his eyes drift close for a moment. He listens to the small movements beneath him, the crackle of tiny shells shifting, the muffled hum of distant current. The sound feels like an old voice speaking through the sea. Patience is the tide's memory. Every return is a beginning. He opens his eyes slowly. The sand sparkles faintly as if hearing itself for the first time. Somewhere nearby, a crab stirs a small one, nearly invisible beneath its shell of dust. It moves slowly, dragging one claw along the surface, leaving a faint, uneven trail. Gary watches it for a long moment. The crab pauses too, as if feeling his gaze. Then it continues onward, unbothered. There's no hurry. Not here, where time feels like a soft loop. Gary continues following the faint trail the crab leaves behind, watching how the sand folds back in to fill it almost immediately. Each motion erases the last, but each erasure feels peaceful, like the sea itself is tucking the world in for rest. He realizes then that maybe the lesson isn't in what remains, but in what disappears gently. He watches the tide roll through, slow and wide, brushing across the dunes with soundless grace. It smooths everything, leaves nothing sharp, nothing out of place. And Gary, small and silent, feels something within him smooth as well the last edges of worry, of memory, of needing to be anywhere else. Gary moves deeper into the dunes where the light bends softly through layers of drifting sand. The water here feels warmer, as though it has been carrying sunlight for miles. Every ripple casts a shadow that dances faintly across the seafloor. He glides through them, letting the light stripe his shell in pale gold. Ahead, something moves small, uneven, struggling. Gary slows, watching carefully. From beneath a mound of sand, a tiny claw emerges, followed by the curved outline of a shell. A hermit crab, smaller than Gary's own eye, crawls into view. Its shell is much too large for it, old, chipped, and heavy. Each time the crab takes a step, it stumbles slightly, correcting itself with visible effort. Gary stops a few inches away, silent as always. He watches the crab move, noticing the rhythm of its motion, 3 steps forward, a pause, a slow adjustment, then another attempt. It leaves a faint trail in the sand that wobbles like an uneven heartbeat. And there's a kind of bravery in it, small, quiet, but unshakable. The crab doesn't seem to notice him at first. It's too focused on its next step. Gary stays still, only the slow rise and fall of the current around him, breaking the silence. After a while, the crab lifts its eyes and spots him. It freezes. Claws raise slightly, not in fear, but in habit, the way small creatures learn to pause before deciding if the world is safe. Gary blinks once, slowly, a gesture that, for him, means peace. The crab lowers its claws again as if understanding. They sit there together, suspended in quiet. After a moment, the crab speaks not with words, but with motion. It turns slightly, showing Gary the back of its shell. Gary sees the cracks, the missing edges, the places where time has thinned it. The crab drags one claw along the edge, almost as if to say, "This used to fit better." Gary glides a little closer. He studies the shell, the faint ridges, the dull shimmer of salt caught in its grooves. He understands. The crab hasn't outgrown its shell overnight. It's been a long, quiet chain, one it probably didn't even notice until the shell began to slow it down. Gary's gaze softened. He thinks about the way his own shell feels heavier some days, especially after long nights of wandering. He never thought of it as a burden, but maybe even burdens can teach something. Maybe weight has its own kind of rhythm. The crab begins to move again. Gary follows at a respectful distance, his eyes tracing the trail left behind. It's uneven, yes, but steady. The crab never stops for long. Sometimes it tilts, and the shell slips a little sideways. Each time it steadies itself, adjusts, and continues. There's a quiet determination in its movement, the kind that doesn't demand to be seen. As they travel together, Gary notices something else, how the sand reacts. Each time the crab stumbles, the ground shifts just enough to catch it. Tiny grains slide beneath its legs, cushioning the fall, redistributing the weight. It's as if the sand itself knows how to help without being asked. That thought hums through Gary like a slow current. The ocean never rushes to fix things. It simply supports them, quietly with patience. He watches as the crab pauses beside a small ridge and rests. For a moment it stays completely still, its body half buried, legs relaxed. The shell tilts slightly but doesn't fall. The sand holds it gently in place. Gary moves beside it, letting his antennae sway softly in this current. The crab's eyes move toward him, slow and reflective. There's no fear now, just shared silence. They sit together, surrounded by the faint whisper of sand shifting. After a while, Gary slides closer, leaving a faint trail beside the crabs. Two lines now run side by side through the dunes. The crab seems to notice. It clicks one claw softly, not in alarm, but in acknowledgement. A sound small enough to disappear almost instantly. Yet in the quiet world of the sand, it feels enormous. Together they continue forward, unhurried. The water hums gently around them. Above, the faint silhouettes of jellyfish drift like sleeping stars. Their light spills faintly across the dunes, painting the two travelers in soft blue and pink hues. Gary wonders what it must feel like for the crab to carry something that once felt like safety but now feels like effort. He realizes the two are not so different. Safety often grows heavy when it's held too long. But letting go requires trust, the kind of trust the ocean has taught him again and again. They reach a small hollow where the current pools. The sand here is darker, cooler, shaped like a shallow bowl. The crab stops, feeling the shift beneath its legs. Gary watches as it slowly lowers itself, leaning slightly to one side. Then, with careful movement, it wriggles free from the shell. The process is slow, deliberate. The shell tips over, landing softly in the sand beside it. The crab, smaller and lighter without it, stretches its legs for the first time in what feels like years. Gary watches, unmoving. It feels sacred somehow, like witnessing the sea breathe. The crab walks in a small circle, uncertain, then pauses. Its body glows faintly in the filtered light. It looks back at the empty shell and then at Gary. There's no regret in its stillness, only recognition. The kind that comes from knowing that sometimes the thing that protected you must eventually be left behind. Gary glides forward, inspecting the shell. He touches its surface gently, tracing the same cracks he saw earlier. It's beautiful, even in its wear. The sand inside it shifts softly, filling the spaces where the crab once fit. Already, the ocean is beginning to reclaim it, smoothing its edges, softening its memory. Gary turns back toward the crab, who now stands in the shallows of light, weightless and free. It's smaller without the shell, but it doesn't look fragile. It looks real, complete in its own way. The current passes through them both, slow and kind. The shell beside them rocks slightly, then settles. The crab moves on, unburdened, disappearing into the soft shimmer of sand. Gary remains a while longer, watching as the shell slowly fills with light and silence. He feels something shift inside him. Not sadness, not joy, but something older and quieter. An understanding. The sand has taught him another truth tonight, that every weight once had a purpose. And when it no longer does, it's okay to set it down gently and continue. The hermit crab fades slowly into the shimmer of distance, its small form blending with the golden dunes. Gary stays still for a long while, watching the way its trail folds into the sand. The lines it left behind begin to disappear, softened by the rhythm of the current. Within minutes, there is nothing left. No shell, no tracks, no sign of the tiny traveler who taught a quiet truth. Only the soft, breathing landscape remains. Gary turns his gaze toward the horizon. The sand stretches endlessly, a vast ocean beneath the ocean itself. The tide has shifted slightly now, a subtle, almost imperceptible pull, as if the sea were inhaling. He can feel it in his shell and the faint vibrations of the ground beneath him. The world never stops moving. It only moves slower when you listen. He begins to glide forward again, his body making small arcs across the uneven floor. Each motion feels smoother now, lighter somehow. The memory of the crab's patience lingers in him like warmth. He doesn't rush. There's nowhere to reach, only more to notice. A gentle ripple travels across the sand in front of him, forming a wave-shaped ridge. He pauses at its base and watches it shift. The pattern is hypnotic, delicate crests rising and falling in slow repetition. It looks alive, though he knows it's only the current sculpting its invisible art. Gary studies the shapes, their symmetry, their impermanence. He thinks even the sand dreams of the sea above it. Every rise, every hollow, a small imitation of the tide's own motion. Each grain pulled into place, resting until another current arrives to begin again. He moves along the ridge, following its curves. Tiny shells lie half buried within it, fragments of life, each carrying its own story. Some are smooth and white, polished by time. Others are broken, edges rough, but gleaming. Gary brushes against one, and it turns slightly in the water, catching a ray of distant sunlight that filters from above. The light reflects off its cracked edge and dances faintly across the sand. Even broken things can shine. He continues on, and the water begins to thicken, with suspended dust particles lifted from the seafloor by the current's slow hands. They swirl around him, floating weightless. It's like drifting through memory itself. Each grain of sand once belonged to something larger. Coral, shell, stone, time. All ground down, softened, made small enough to rest together. Gary imagines them whispering stories to one another, fragments of everything the sea has ever touched. He passes a hollow where the sand has gathered in a gentle spiral. It's shaped like the inside of his own shell, a natural coil endlessly folding inward. He circles it once, twice, then stops at the center. The spiral feels ancient. It reminds him that everything, from the smallest snail to the widest current, moves in patterns that repeat not because they're trapped, but because they belong. He lowers himself slightly, feeling the cool touch of the sand beneath him. For a moment, he closes his eyes. The world becomes sensation, the low hum of distant water, the faint tick of shifting grains, the steady, slow rhythm of the sea's unseen heart. It's enough. The kind of peace that doesn't need to be named. When he opens his eyes again, the light has changed. It's softer now, tinted with the faintest hue of violet. Dusk is beginning to seep through the ocean, coloring the sand in dusky blues and purples. Tiny organisms glow faintly in the deep plankton, stirred by the same slow pulse of the water. Their light flickers gently across the dunes, forming 1,000 quiet constellations. Gary glides among them, and each time he passes over a cluster, they glow brighter, as if greeting him. He feels their warmth against his shell, faint but real. It reminds him of something SpongeBob once said, though Gary had only half listened at the time. Even the smallest lights can make the dark feel safe. He hadn't understood then. But here, in this living dusk, surrounded by the shimmer of microscopic stars, he finally does. He slows his movement, letting the lights gather around him. They swirl softly, carried by invisible threads of current. For a brief moment, he feels suspended between two skies, the glowing one beneath him, and the one he imagines above the surface. Two mirrors, one of light, one of shadow, both infinite. A school of tiny fish passes by, their bodies flashing like quicksilver before vanishing again into the blue. Gary doesn't follow. He simply watches. Every motion in the sea seems to hold purpose without urgency. Gary drifts beyond the coral slope, where the water grows softer and the light falls like a slow drizzle of gold dust. The reef thins out here, giving way to a valley of soft, waving strands, pale tendrils of seaweed that move as though breathing. Each strand bends and sways in rhythm, as if the sea itself were thinking, its thoughts drifting in green silence. This is the place the current brings things to rest. Fragments, memories, whispers carried from every corner of the ocean. Gary can feel it the moment he enters. The stillness here is different. It isn't empty. It's full. The sand beneath him is darker, almost silver in tone, like moonlight captured underwater. Tiny shells are scattered across it, half buried, their edges glowing faintly from the light above. They seem to hum softly, as if holding on to something that once mattered. Perhaps they do. Gary moves slowly, each motion deliberate. The seaweed brushes gently against his shell as he passes, whispering in soft clicks. It's like walking through a dream, quiet, layered, endless. Everywhere he looks, there are traces of stories. A broken bit of coral shaped like a heart. A shard of a bottle reflecting tiny rainbows. A pearl resting in an open clam that never closes. The ocean doesn't discard. It remembers differently. He glides toward a cluster of coral that looks unlike the others he's seen, wide, flat, covered in delicate tendrils that wave lazily in the current. Tiny particles drift between them, sparkling faintly, caught in loops of slow motion. It looks almost like a garden, not one planted, but one that grew from everything left behind. Gary pauses at its edge. He doesn't know what draws him, but something about this place feels familiar. It hums faintly, like a shell held to the ear, echoing sounds you can't quite name. He lowers himself onto the sand beside a small opening between the coral folds. A soft vibration moves through him, a memory, not his own. Images form quietly, like fog lifting from a field. The laughter of SpongeBob, the gleam of morning light through a pineapple window, the faint clink of a food bowl being filled. For a moment, he almost hears it not in sound, but in sensation. Warmth, care, home. The coral releases a tiny bubble that drifts upward, wobbling like a fragile thought. Gary watches it rise until it disappears into the layers above. Then, just as gently, another appears. And another. Each bubble seems to carry something unseen, maybe a feeling, maybe a forgotten dream. He realizes now why this place feels alive. It is alive. The sea's quiet garden, where every lost or forgotten thought finds a place to settle. He begins to move deeper into it, gliding between pillars of coral and fans of kelp. Some of the seaweed glows faintly pale greens and soft blues, like veins of light pulsing through the darkness. Small creatures hide among them, their shapes barely visible fish that look like drifting leaves, shrimp that mimic pebbles. Everything here has learned the art of blending, of being part of something larger. As he passes, Gary feels a faint pull, not physical but emotional, like a memory brushing against him. He can almost sense what this garden holds, the sighs of whales from far away, the dreams of fish who never surface, the silent reflections of shells cracked and left behind. Each current that moves through the garden seems to carry voices, not words, but impressions. They swirl around Gary softly, as if the ocean were whispering its diary in a language only silence can understand. He drifts over a hollow filled with sea glass, smooth, curved fragments that shimmer like frozen time. Each one catches light and sends it scattering in gentle ripples. When he looks closely, he sees faint shapes reflected inside them, outlines of faces, moments, laughter, and loss. They aren't real, yet they feel like echoes of lives once lived. Gary lingers. The beauty of it is quiet, almost sacred. He realizes that every bit of broken glass, every forgotten shell, every faded mark in the sand is part of something vast, a living memory, endlessly reshaped by the sea. And he feels small again, but comforted. To be small is to belong. A soft sound travels through the water, a deep, resonant hum that seems to come from everywhere at once. The plants shiver gently. The sand stirs. It's not threatening, it's welcoming. Like the sea acknowledging his presence, telling him, "You are part of this too." Gary stays still, letting the hum pass through him. It vibrates in his shell, low and steady, like a lullaby, sung by the ocean itself. He closes his eyes. In that sound, he hears distant ripples of SpongeBob's laughter, again muffled and far away, but bright. He remembers the warmth of home, the comfort of routine, the simplicity of being understood without words. When he opens his eyes, a new light has appeared in the garden. It's faint at first, a silvery shimmer weaving through the water. Then slowly it brightens, revealing shapes hidden within the coral, carvings in stone, etched by time and tide. They look like spirals, waves, and symbols patterns that feel ancient. Not made by hands, but by the patient dance of the ocean itself. He follows the trail of light deeper, his body leaving small ripples in the sand behind him. The deeper he goes, the quieter it becomes. Even the hum fades into a soft pulse, like a heartbeat at rest. This part of the garden feels untouched, a sanctuary where thought turns to rest. He senses that the memories here are older, softer, half asleep. Somewhere within, a shell opens and closes slowly, releasing a faint sigh of bubbles that drift upward like tiny souls. Gary watches them go. Each one vanishes into the shimmer above, gone but not lost. Nothing here ever truly vanishes. It only becomes part of something else, another grain of sand, another current, another quiet moment in the sea's long dream. He takes one slow breath, if a snail could breathe that way, and lets it sink in. This garden isn't a place of endings. It's a place of keeping, where even forgotten thoughts find peace. Gary glides further into the garden, the water thickening with drifting light. Each strand of kelp now glows softly, its edges traced by faint luminescence, like moonlight caught in motion. The deeper he goes, the quieter everything becomes. Not empty quiet, but a fullness that hums beneath the silence. It feels as if the whole sea is listening to itself. He moves between wide curtains of seaweed, each one shifting as he passes, revealing glimpses of what lies beyond. The sand grows smoother here, untouched by current or storm. It looks like silk, soft silver ripples that seem to pulse with a life of their own. Harry stops near a clearing where the plants part in a wide circle. In its center lies a low mound of coral, rounded and pale, shaped almost like a heart resting against the seafloor. The coral glows faintly blue, its surface marked by spirals and lines that shimmer as though breathing. Tiny bubbles rise from it at a slow, steady rhythm. He approaches carefully, sensing something delicate in its presence. The moment he nears it, the light brightens, not sharply, but warmly, like recognition. The bubbles drift upward in soft chains, and within them, faint images shimmer, fleeting memories not of sight, but of feeling. The laughter of children near the shore, the tremor of waves hitting rocks, the hush of someone whispering a wish to the sea. Gary watches, mesmerized. Each bubble bursts as it rises, releasing a faint shimmer into the water, and then it's gone. But the warmth lingers, even after the image fades. He lowers his body slightly, resting beside the coral mound. He doesn't try to understand it. He just listens. The sea speaks in sensations, not in language, and somehow that makes more sense. After a moment, a current sweeps through the clearing, carrying soft particles of sand and glass. The coral's glow flickers. The sand begins to rise in delicate spirals, and inside them, new visions appear slower this time, deeper. He sees outlines of jellyfish pulsing under a violet sky, their translucent forms glowing like floating lanterns. Then an old shell half buried in the sand, its spiral cracked but gleaming. Then the faint echo of a song not heard but felt, like a memory of sound itself. Harry's eyes half close. He realizes these aren't random. They're fragments of things the ocean once touched, thoughts too light to anchor anywhere else gathered here to rest. This is where the sea keeps what the world forgets. He inches closer to the glowing coral, touching its surface with the edge of his shell. It's smooth, warm, and alive. At his touch, the glow deepens, spreading slowly outward through the water. The spirals on its surface begin to shift, not like carvings, but like waves rearranging themselves. Gary can feel it now. The coral isn't remembering for the sea. It's remembering as the sea. He stays still, and something extraordinary begins to happen. The light around him trembles softly, then dissolves into a gentle mist of color blues, greens, faint pinks. They swirl around him like thought made visible. In them, shapes emerge and vanish again, hands reaching into water, the silhouette of a ship passing above, bubbles rising from laughter. Each vision drifts close, lingers for a breath, then fades into the quiet again. One of them doesn't fade right away. A faint outline takes shape, a yellow figure sitting by a window, sunlight streaming across his face. SpongeBob. He's still and peaceful, staring out at the calm sea beyond his home. Gary remembers that moment it happened once, long ago, on a morning where nothing was said, yet everything felt complete. He remembers the warmth of the sunlight through the glass, the sound of waves far away, and the steady rhythm of SpongeBob's breathing. That memory glows brightly for a moment, then drifts upward like all the others, dissolving into the blue. Gary watches it go. He feels no sadness, only understanding. The ocean doesn't cling to what it remembers. It lets everything rise when it's ready. He begins to move again, circling the coral mound slowly, tracing the lines of its spirals. Each curve seems to hum a different tone, low and soft, blending into the sound of the sea. Together they form a melody so faint, it feels like silence disguised as music. As he glides, he notices that the seaweed around the clearing has begun to change color. The greens are deepening into shades of blue and violet. The light dims slightly, but the glow within the plants grows stronger, like stars beginning to appear as the sky darkens. It's as if the garden is responding to the rhythm of his movement, the same way the sea responds to the pull of the moon. He feels it deeply, this connection, this unspoken conversation between him and everything around him. The coral, the sand, the drifting particles, they move with him, not against him. Every ripple he makes is met with another that completes it. Every small disturbance becomes part of the whole. The deeper he travels, the more he feels the garden breathing slow, vast, unending. Each breath carries faint echoes of emotion, as if the sea remembers not just thoughts, but feelings themselves. Loneliness, joy, curiosity, rest. They drift through him softly, leaving traces that fade like ripples after a stone is dropped. He wonders if maybe thoughts themselves are like sand, countless, small, carried by currents beyond their own control. They move, they rest, they merge, and eventually they become something new. The sea doesn't hold them in place. It lets them flow, trusting that everything lost will return in another form. Gary slows his pace. He looks back the way he came, but the path has vanished, covered now by a shifting mist of light and motion. Only the faint glow of the coral remains behind him, pulsing gently in the distance like a beacon in a dream. He doesn't feel lost. Here, direction doesn't matter. Forward, backward, it's all the same rhythm, the same gentle flow of remembering and releasing. He turns again and continues deeper into the garden. The light changes once more, soft green blending into faint rose like dawn rising through water. It's beautiful in a way that feels eternal. Gary drifts through it quietly, feeling every moment like a whisper meant only for him. Gary drifts deeper into the valley of light until the current softens to almost nothing. The world feels suspended here. Time paused, movement turned into thought. Even the smallest particles of sand seem to float mid-motion, frozen in the hush of the sea's long breath. He senses that he's nearing something ancient. The glow that fills the water grows warmer, shifting from blue to gold, from gold to a deep amber that hums softly. It isn't sunlight, it's memory made visible. Each wave of color pulses like a slow heartbeat, echoing through the water and into him. The seaweed has thinned now, replaced by wide, undulating veils of translucent coral. They rise from the sand like draped curtains, their folds heavy with time. Between them, the path narrows into a spiral, a slow descent, winding toward the garden's center. Gary follows, each movement careful, reverent. It feels as though the sea itself is guiding him somewhere sacred. At the center lies a single object. It's not coral, nor rock, nor plant. It's a shell. Large, ancient, its surface dulled by the press of centuries. Its spiral is wide and perfect, marked by countless grooves where the tide has left its touch. It rests half buried in the silver sand, glowing faintly with the same amber light that fills the garden. Gary stops several lengths away. Even from here, he can feel something radiating from it, a warmth that isn't temperature, a sound that isn't heard but felt. It vibrates through the water, low and constant, like the ocean's own memory breathing through the shell. He approaches slowly. As he does, the sand around it begins to shimmer, releasing faint ripples of color. Tiny shapes flicker in the glow echoes of creatures long gone. A jellyfish, a seahorse, a turtle gliding through an unseen current. Each appears, then fades, leaving behind only the sensation of movement. When Gary reaches the edge of the shell, the vibration deepens. It feels almost like a voice, ancient and gentle, speaking without words. He doesn't need to understand. He only needs to listen. And so he does. The light around him begins to pulse in rhythm, with his own heartbeat slow, steady, endless. The surface of the shell gleams brighter, and within its spiral, shadows begin to move. They twist and shimmer, forming faint scenes that unfold like distant dreams. He sees flashes of the sea as it once was vast and unshaped, before reefs rose or fish swam. The sand was clean and untouched, and the water pulsed with newborn light. Then slowly, life began soft forms moving through the depths, leaving trails of thought that became memory. Every ripple, every whisper, every life that ever drifted here left something behind, and the sea kept it all. Gary realizes now what this place truly is. It isn't just a garden. It's the sea's mind, a living archive of everything it has ever held. Every forgotten moment, every fleeting feeling, every dream released into the water finds its way here, becoming part of the endless cycle of remembrance. He gazes into the spiral, watching as images shift and bloom, a school of fish swirling in perfect harmony, a child dipping their hand into a tide pool, laughing at the cool touch, a whale rising through moonlit waves, singing to a distant echo. The images blend together, flowing like water over water, until Gary can no longer tell where one ends and another begins. The vibrations deepen again. He feels them through his shell, through his body, through the very sand beneath him. They don't speak in words, but their meaning is clear. Nothing is ever truly forgotten. Every moment continues somewhere. Gary lowers himself closer, resting lightly against the base of the ancient shell. The glow intensifies, wrapping him in a soft amber mist. He closes his eyes, letting the warmth seep into him. The hum grows louder, and suddenly, he is no longer just hearing it. He is inside it. He drifts through layers of sound and color memories, not his own, passing through him like gentle tides. He feels the pulse of anemones blooming at night, the shiver of fish weaving through kelp, the sigh of waves meeting coral stone. Each sensation flows through him, leaving behind a trace of light. He isn't separate from it anymore. He's part of the ocean's memory, another thought in its endless garden. A faint shimmer passes before his eyes. He sees SpongeBob again, this time not as an image, but as a memory carried on the current. SpongeBob is sitting at his desk, writing something on a small, uneven piece of paper. He looks tired but peaceful. Gary remembers that night how SpongeBob had whispered softly, "Good night." The ocean has grown darker again, though this darkness feels different than before. It is softer now, no longer empty or vast, but full, like a blanket stretched over a world that hums quietly beneath it. The light from the deep has faded behind Gary, but he can still feel it pulsing faintly inside his shell, a memory of warmth, a whisper that says, "You are still part of everything." He rises slowly through the calm water. Each movement sends small rings of light drifting outward like echoes of a heartbeat that the sea listens to and carries onward. The water grows cooler as he ascends, the colors shifting from gold to deep indigo. The silence is gentle here, not heavy, not lonely. It feels alive, like the night is breathing with him. Gary pauses near a field of tall seagrass that waves like dark ribbons in the current. The blades move together, slow and patient, bending with every invisible touch of the tide. He watches the rhythm for a long time, feeling how it repeats, bend, sway, rise, return. No single blade fights the water. They all move as one, trusting the current to carry them where they need to be. He realizes that maybe that's what wisdom is, not resisting what comes, but learning to flow with it quietly without losing oneself. The grass does not need to speak to understand the sea. It simply listens. He continues forward, the seagrass brushing softly against his shell. Tiny creatures hide among the roots, little crabs and sleeping shrimp, their bodies glowing faintly like flickering lanterns. Each one lives in its own small corner, safe beneath the endless sky of water. They do not see the whole sea, yet somehow they belong perfectly to it. Gary feels a calm gratitude for their presence, reminders that even the smallest life contributes to the rhythm of the deep. After some time, he reaches the edge of the reef. Beyond it, the open ocean stretches out vast, dark, and shimmering under the silver light filtering down from above. The moon must be full tonight. Its glow pours through the surface in long, trembling ribbons that reach all the way to where he floats. The sight fills him with a quiet awe. The light feels alive, not harsh or bright, but steady and kind, touching everything equally. He drifts closer to the light, rising through the ribbons as if climbing an invisible staircase. Each shimmer seems to hum with a tone of its own, low, clear soothing. Together they form a quiet music that feels both ancient and new. Gary realizes that this is the ocean's night song, the melody the sea hums when everything else has gone still. As he floats upward, he feels the pull of the surface growing stronger, not urgent, just steady, like a slow heartbeat calling him home. Tiny bubbles rise around him, catching the moonlight and scattering it into 1,000 moving stars. He moves through them gently, careful not to disturb their fragile glow. Each bubble seems to whisper as it passes, patience, stillness, trust. He remembers how SpongeBob sometimes gazes out his window late at night, watching the water shimmer beyond the glass. He never says much in those moments. He just looks soft-eyed, thoughtful. Gary used to wonder what his friend was thinking about. Now he understands. Some silences are not empty. They are full of listening. The night offers its own kind of wisdom, one that speaks in feelings rather than words. He slows his ascent, letting the water move around him. He can feel the rhythm of the tides shifting the way each wave reaches out, then falls back again. It reminds him of breathing, of how every living thing inhales and exhales not just air, but time itself. The sea breathes through him too, gently turning his movements into part of its pattern. He glides past a coral ledge where a family of sea snails rests small, round, and still. Their shells gleam faintly in the moonlight, spirals catching the glow like silver lines. Gary watches them with quiet affection. They are his kind, but they each move differently, rest differently, exist differently, and yet all of them follow the same silent rhythm, a rhythm older than thought. He thinks of the garden again, of the shell that held the ocean's memory. It had hummed with the same tone he feels now, as if the sea's wisdom were everywhere, just waiting to be noticed. Maybe the night doesn't teach with words because it doesn't need to. It teaches by being, by showing that stillness can be full of truth. Gary rests near the coral ledge, his body half in shadow, half in moonlight. The light above shivers slightly as a gentle current passes. He listens not with ears, but with all of himself. The soft creak of coral, the hush of sand shifting, the faint buzz of distant plankton together, they form a quiet chorus. He realizes that every sound belongs. Every silence matters. Nothing is wasted. not even the pauses between movement. He stays there for a long time, doing nothing. But it doesn't feel like nothing. It feels like listening. It feels like the sea and the night and his own slow heartbeat are all moving together, part of one endless song. When he finally stirs, the water feels lighter around him. He begins to drift forward again, leaving faint trails in the sand that vanish almost as soon as they form. He doesn't mind. He knows now that the sea remembers all things, even those that seem to disappear. Every touch, every motion, every silence, they are all part of the same quiet wisdom. He continues through the dark water, guided by the moonlight that spills down like gentle rain. The night follows him softly, patient and eternal. And somewhere in that silence, Gary feels it again, the hum of understanding. Not loud, not grand, but true. The sea doesn't rush to teach. It waits for those who are ready to listen. And tonight, under the moon's silver gaze, Gary listens. The current is calm, slow as thought. It moves like a soft dream, turning every emotion into a kind of meditation. Gary drifts within it, not pushing, not resisting. The water carries him between tall coral pillars that rise like sleeping towers, their tops lost in the silver haze of the moonlight above. Tiny fish move between the coral shadows, their scales catching bits of light like flickering stars. They travel in slow, loose groups, not hurried, not afraid. There's something peaceful in how they move. They don't chase the light or flee the dark. They simply swim where the current leads, trusting its quiet direction. Gary watches them pass, their bodies leaving soft glows in the water. Each one a small, shining thought. He realizes how easily he might have missed this beauty if he'd rushed past. The ocean only shows its quiet wonders to those who slow down enough to see them. He moves closer to a coral wall. Its surface is rough and ancient, covered in layers of life shells, moss, faint vines of algae that wave gently. The colors are muted under the moonlight, gray, blue, violet, and the pale green of deep sleep. Gary traces one of the ridges with his feeler. The coral feels alive, but calm, a body that breathes so slowly it could be mistaken for stone. He can sense time in its structure, the centuries of water and light that shaped it. Every ridge, every hollow was once a decision made by the sea. It reminds him that wisdom doesn't happen suddenly. It grows in layers over time, through patience and change. As he lingers there, a faint shimmer catches his attention. Above, near the surface, a thin wave of moonlight drifts across the water, bending through the current in slow spirals. Each time it shifts, the coral around him glows faintly, like the sea itself is breathing light. The rhythm is perfect, a pulse without effort. Gary begins to move with it, matching his pace to the slow pulse of the glow. He finds that when he does, everything feels easier. The water moves through him instead of against him. He doesn't need to force his way forward. He just needs to flow. That's what the night is teaching him now, the wisdom of effortless motion. The kind of strength that isn't loud or fast, but constant and sure. The coral doesn't fight the tide. The moon doesn't hurry to rise. Everything simply is, and that is enough. A gentle sound hums in the distance, the voice of the sea at night. It's not quite music, not quite silence. It's a low vibration that touches the edges of everything, like a mother's hand brushing through the dark. Gary listens. He can't understand it in words, but he feels what it means. Be still, and you will know. The sound drifts away, absorbed by the water. Gary stays quiet for a while, letting the rhythm settle into him. He feels his thoughts slow, his senses stretch. The boundaries between himself and the sea begin to blur. He's not observing anymore. He's part of the pattern. Far below, a single bubble rises, gliding lazily upward. He follows its path with his eyes. It moves so smoothly, untouched by the rush of current or the weight of time. A perfect example of surrender, light enough to be carried, steady enough not to break. Gary watches until it reaches the edge of the moonlight and disappears in a quiet shimmer. He realizes then that surrender is not weakness. It's trust. The bubble doesn't fight gravity or fear the surface. It just moves toward where it's meant to go. Perhaps the night's wisdom is the same, not telling him what to do, but reminding him how to be. He continues forward, gliding into a clearing where the coral parts and the sand stretches smooth and wide. The moonlight falls across it in soft, trembling waves. The water here is clear, calm, the kind of quiet that feels alive, waiting. Gary stops in the center of the clearing. The sand below glows faintly, reflecting the moonlight into tiny constellations. He looks down and sees his own reflection ripple across the grains. It's faint, wavering, but still there. He studies it for a moment. His shell, marked by years of slow travel, catches the faint light in its spiral grooves. Each curve tells a story, places he's been, time he's lived, moments he's carried in silence. He realizes that even he, small and quiet as he is, carries the ocean's memory. He's part of its wisdom now. The thought fills him with a peace he's never felt before. He doesn't need to seek answers anymore. They're already here in the rhythm of water, in the pulse of light, in the softness of the night. All he has to do is listen. The current shifts, brushing gently across the sand. It moves in a pattern so subtle that it almost seems deliberate. The sand rises in thin trails, forming small spirals that mirror the shape of his own shell. Gary stares, mesmerized. The sea is showing him something, a reflection of himself in its own movement. The pattern spreads slowly, rippling outward until the entire clearing glows with faint spiral shapes. Each one drifts, reforms, fades, and returns an endless cycle, quiet and complete. Gary moves slowly through them, careful not to disturb their balance. He feels like he's gliding through thought, through the sea's way of remembering. The spirals remind him of how all things are connected, beginnings and endings, movement and rest, light and dark. Everything turns always back to itself. He stops near one glowing spiral and lowers himself onto the sand. The light pulses gently beneath him, rising and fading like a breath. He lets his eyes close, feeling the rhythm through his shell. In that silence, he feels something vast, a sense that he's not separate from the sea, not even from the night. He's part of a whole, ancient and kind. And in that knowing, Gary rests not because he's weary, but because he understands that even in stillness, life continues. The ocean moves through him. The moonlight remembers him. And the night, soft and eternal, hums its quiet wisdom all around. Gary pauses at the crest of the coral ridge, his antennae lifting slightly. Below him, the reef glows like a slow heartbeat. Tiny creatures hum with their own rhythm, shrimp clicking, fish shifting in sleep, the far-off song of a whale echoing through the deep. The world feels vast, but it no longer feels empty. It feels connected. Every sound, every flicker of light, Every grain of sand is part of something larger, something soft and endless. He closes his eyes and the quiet folds around him. It's not silence, not really. It's conversation, spoken in the gentlest tones, the way bubbles rise, the way currents brush coral, the way even the dark seems to hum with life. This is the night's wisdom. It doesn't speak in words, it speaks in rhythm, in patience, in the still assurance that everything moves, even when it looks still. Gary feels a thought, simple and wordless, drift through him like a current. There's no need to rush when time itself is kind. He moves again, slower now, not because he's tired, but because the night asks for it. Each inch feels meaningful. Each pause feels alive. There's something deeply comforting about this pace, as if by slowing down, he's finally able to move with the ocean instead of through it. The world isn't a race to the next thing, it's a rhythm to fall into, a pulse to match. A faint shimmer catches his eye. It's an old bottle, resting on its side in the sand. Inside it, a scrap of paper curls against the glass. The ink faded, the message long washed away. Gary touches it gently with his feeler, feeling the cool surface. Once someone sealed a thought inside this bottle. Once they hoped it would be found. Now it's just part of the ocean's story, a quiet reminder that even forgotten words can find peace and stillness. The bottle glints once in the moonlight, then fades into shadow. Gary continues, weaving past seaweed that dances like sleepy curtains. His shell reflects bits of light from above, faint, silvery, and soft. He doesn't need to know where he's going. The journey itself has become his teacher. The night has no maps, no signs, and no clocks. Yet somehow he never feels lost. He remembers SpongeBob again, that bright, boundless energy and the laughter that fills the house, even in the middle of the night. Gary used to think his stillness was the opposite of SpongeBob's spark. But tonight he understands. They're not opposites at all. They're halves of the same rhythm, one racing heartbeat, one steady breath. Together they make balance. And maybe that's what wisdom really is, not knowing everything. Not reaching the end, just finding the balance between stillness and motion, sound and silence, light and shadow. A school of jellyfish drifts above him, their bodies glowing like lanterns in the sea. Each one pulses slowly, lighting up the water in pinks and blues. Gary watches them move effortless, unhurried, perfectly in tune. They don't rush toward the light or flee from the dark. They simply move with what is. He imagines himself as one of them, glowing softly, carried wherever the current goes. The thought fills him with a kind of peace that words can't hold. He doesn't need to glow to be seen. He doesn't need to speak to be understood. All he needs is to be. The sand beneath him grows finer, smoother like powdered glass. He feels each grain press gently beneath his body. The first hint of dawn comes not with light, but with a feeling, a subtle stirring in the water, like the ocean taking a deeper breath. The darkness hasn't faded yet, but it's thinner now, softer at the edges. The reef is still half asleep, wrapped in the slow rhythm of night, when Gary stirs from his resting place among the seagrass. He doesn't move right away. His eyes blink open, slow and heavy, adjusting to the faint shimmer above. The world is still hushed. No sound of SpongeBob bustling around the kitchen. No clatter of breakfast pans or eager footsteps. Just the low hum of the sea, deep and endless. Gary stretches a little, his shell tilting as grains of sand shift beneath him. The current brushes over his face like a whisper, carrying the faint taste of salt and sunlight. Something is changing, not loudly, not suddenly, but with the kind of gentleness only the ocean understands. The night's wisdom still lingers in him like a slow pulse. He can feel it in the rhythm of the tide, in the calm between each heartbeat. The world, it seems, is teaching him to move not with effort, but with awareness, to see without rushing, to breathe without needing to fill every space with sound. He takes his first slow glide forward. The sand beneath him gives way easily, soft as thought. Every grain feels like a memory of the night before, the stillness, the patience, the sense of belonging to something vast and kind. The ocean hums around him, and he hums back, not in sound, but in movement. Above, faint shafts of light begin to filter down through the surface. They shimmer like pale threads weaving through the blue. They don't pierce the dark, they dissolve it, gently and slowly, as if even the dawn respects the quiet that came before. Gary watches the first colors of morning spill into the reef, not bright or golden yet, but gray-blue, muted, tender. The coral stirs with a soft life. A small school of fish emerges from their sleeping hollow, swimming in unison, their fins catching the faint light. The seaweed sways as if waking from a long dream. And Gary, the silent snail, moves among them, small, almost invisible, yet perfectly in rhythm with it all. He passes by a hollow coral that glows faintly from within. Tiny shrimp flicker in its depths, darting back and forth like sparks. He watches them for a while, not because they're doing anything remarkable, but because they're alive in their own way, purposeful, unhurried. He remembers SpongeBob again, how he often races out of bed at sunrise, ready for the day, full of laughter and plans. Gary has always admired that brightness, even if it's different from his own nature. But now, in this moment, he feels the balance between them more clearly than ever. SpongeBob's joy burns like the sun. Gary's peace glows like the moon. Together, they complete the same sky. He glides past an empty shell lying on the seafloor. It's smooth, spiraled, almost identical to his own, except for the tiny crack that runs along its edge. He pauses beside it, gazing into the hollow. For a moment, he feels a strange sense of recognition, as if he's looking at another version of himself, one that once moved, once lived, and then became part of the stillness. But there's no sadness in it, only calm acceptance. The ocean takes, the ocean gives, and in between those two gestures, everything finds its peace. A faint hum drifts through the water, not from the sea this time, but from above. It's the sound of the morning surf filtered through layers of light, waves brushing against the surface, forming ripples that tremble all the way down. The world is waking, but not all at once. Gary feels the warmth of it reach him. It's delicate, like a promise. The return of quiet doesn't mean the end of stillness. It means learning to carry that stillness into movement, to let peace exist even when the world begins again. He turns toward home, though he doesn't rush. His trail marks faint lines in the sand, catching bits of reflected light. Behind him, the reef begins to glow coral petals unfolding, small creatures emerging, the hum of life weaving back into motion. But all of it happens gently, like a song starting from silence. As he moves, he feels the lessons of the night settle deeper into his shell, the weight of calm, the softness of time, the quiet truth that not all journeys lead away. Some lead back. He glides past a patch of kelp that brushes against him, slow and kind. Each blade sways like a thought, rising and falling in a rhythm older than the stars. Gary watches how the kelp bends with every current, never breaking, never resisting. It knows that strength comes from softness. The ocean's colors shift again, blue into lavender, lavender into gold. The light above grows stronger, and the reef begins to sparkle. The night is leaving, but not vanishing. It leaves its trace in every shadow, every slow movement. Gary realizes that quiet never truly goes away. It simply changes shape. He reaches the edge of a coral ridge and pauses there. From this height, he can see the faint outline of Bikini Bottom, in the far distance, the hazy silhouette of SpongeBob's pineapple, the curved roof of the Krusty Krab, the faint, sleepy movement of the town beginning to wake. It feels distant, yet close a reminder of where he belongs and what he carries back with him. He stays there for a long while, watching as the sunlight spreads across the reef like a gentle tide. The fish sparkle, the seaweed sways, and the shadows shrink. The world is awake again. But in Gary's heart, the night's quiet remains untouched, like a pearl resting deep within his shell. The return to quiet, he realizes, isn't about retreating from the noise. It's about bringing calm into it, carrying stillness into motion, silence into sound. He takes one last look at the glowing sea before turning toward home, his path winding softly through the coral. Each inch forward feels deliberate, patient, sacred. The ocean moves with him, and for a moment, it's hard to tell whether he's moving through it or it's moving through him. The morning hums softly, and the world continues, but Gary moves within it, like a heartbeat of peace. Gary continues along the reef's edge, his movements small but sure, tracing the gentle curve of the coral as the light slowly expands. The dawn deepens, no longer gray-blue, but brushed with soft gold. Threads of sunlight slip through the surface and scatter like liquid silk, turning the sand into something that glows from within. The water carries a faint hum now, the kind that belongs only to early morning, a mingling of silence and awakening. It's not loud, not busy. It's the sound of beginnings that haven't yet become noise. Gary feels it ripple through him like warmth settling into his shell. He pauses near a cluster of small rocks where tiny bubbles rise in steady rhythm. He watches them drift upward one after another, each catching a glimmer of gold before fading into nothing. They remind him of thoughts, the kind that float up quietly from somewhere deep inside. Most of them vanish before they reach the surface, but that doesn't make them meaningless. Their rising is their purpose. Gary turns his eyes upward, following the bubbles until they disappear. Beyond the water's ceiling, the first full beam of sunlight pierces through. It lands across the reef, touching coral and sand alike, painting everything with a soft fire. In that glow, Gary can see how the world wakes gently. The sea stars unfold their arms. The seaweed lifts toward the light. Even the smallest grains of sand seem to shimmer. Everything knows its place in this rhythm, not competing, not rushing, just becoming. He moves again, and the light catches his shell, tracing the spirals that form its pattern. Each curve seems to hold a memory of the night's silence, the patience of the deep, the whisper of the currents. Every line feels like part of a story still being written, one so quiet that it doesn't need words. A small shadow passes over him, a sleepy jellyfish gliding lazily through the golden water. Its movements are unhurried, graceful. Gary watches it drift past, its glow faint in the morning light. The jellyfish seems unaware of how beautiful it looks, and maybe that's what makes it beautiful. It doesn't try. Gary feels a kinship with it. The jellyfish floats without aim. He crawls without rush. Both of them part of a quiet rhythm that doesn't need to announce itself. A soft current moves through the coral valley, bringing with it the scent of home, faint traces of sponge cake and soap bubbles, the sweetness of SpongeBob's morning routine. The smell reaches him like a dream returning from the edges of sleep. Gary knows that SpongeBob is awake now, humming to himself, maybe cleaning the kitchen, maybe calling softly, "Gary? Gare Bear?" The thought makes him feel warm, not in a way that pulls him from his stillness, but in a way that folds it deeper into comfort. He doesn't hurry. The journey home isn't about getting there quickly. It's about carrying the quiet of the ocean back with him, letting it live in the corners of his small, ordinary life. He slides past a patch of sand where the currents have drawn looping patterns overnight. They look like ripples frozen in place, soft spirals that echo his own shell. He follows the curves with his gaze, realizing how the sea repeats its shapes everywhere, in shells, in waves, in wind, even in the path of a drifting thought. Maybe, he thinks, all wisdom is circular. Everything returns to its beginning, changed but whole. He pauses, letting that thought sink into him. Around him, the reef hums softly, full of waking life. A pair of clownfish dart from one coral branch to another, their colors glowing in the lights. A sea cucumber shifts lazily, half buried in sand. The gentle clatter of distant crabs echoes like a faint heartbeat. Yet despite the movement, the calm remains unbroken. The world isn't restless, it's alive. And that, Gary realizes, is the balance, the way life can move without noise, breathe without chaos. He continues his slow journey, feeling the water grow warmer around him. The deeper blues fade to turquoise, and the coral thins into open sand plains. The morning current brushes against his shell, guiding him forward as if the ocean itself wants him home. As he moves, memories drift through his mind, soft, wordless ones. SpongeBob setting down a bowl of food. The clink of a snail dish on tile. The way SpongeBob's laughter fills the house until even the walls seem to smile. Gary's antennae twitch gently. He can almost hear it now, muffled but near the distant echo of that laughter reaching through the water. The sound of life, bright and unbothered, waiting for him to return. But even that sound feels quieter now. Not because it's faded, but because he's learned how to listen differently. Oh, where before he might have been startled by the noise, now he hears the softness beneath it, the love inside the laughter, the care within the call. The path home is shorter than he remembers. Time has softened its edges, stretching and shrinking in rhythm with his peace. Every inch forward feels timeless, not a step toward something, but a continuation of what already is. He glides over a patch of smooth stone, watching his reflection shimmer across it. The image bends and sways, fractured by the water's movement. But when he slows, it becomes clear again, his tiny eyes, his spiraled shell, his small but certain shape. He looks at himself and sees for the first time, not just a snail, but a part of something much larger, a stillness that belongs to the sea, the sand, the stars above. He is not separate from the quiet. He is the quiet. A soft ripple passes by, carrying a single, drifting feather of sea foam. It brushes his shell before floating upward, light and effortless. Gary watches it go, smiling in his own small, wordless way. He resumes his path, slow and steady. Behind him, his trail catches the morning light, shimmering for a moment before fading into the sand as all things eventually do. But that's the beauty of it, he thinks. To leave no mark that needs to last. To exist gently enough that the world remains untouched, yet somehow more peaceful for having held you. The light grows stronger now, streaming down in radiant gold. The reef glitters, the sand glows, and the sea hums a soft, endless lullaby, the same one that rocked the night, now reshaped by morning. Gary moves toward it all, carrying within him the quiet he found beneath the stars. The light continues to deepen as Gary nears the familiar sands of home. The water here feels different, warmer, gentler, filled with faint traces of sound from Bikini Bottom. Somewhere above, bubbles rise from SpongeBob's pineapple chimney, each one wobbling and drifting upward like sleepy sighs. The world is stirring now, but the calm within Gary stays unbroken. He pauses by a large sea rock, the kind he's passed countless times before, but this morning it looks different. Maybe it's the way the light lands across it, or maybe it's him slower now and more awake in the quiet ways. The surface is covered in fine moss, tiny glimmers of dew-like bubbles trapped in its texture. He watches them shiver in the current, releasing one by one. Each bubble that drifts away reminds him of the thoughts he used to carry, small worries, forgotten plans, the quiet ache of not being understood. They rise now, released, no longer heavy. He lets them go without effort, without even meaning to. Gary continues on, sliding down a slope of sand where the reef gives way to open plain. The view opens wide before him, the shadowed outline of SpongeBob's pineapple, the faint glow of the morning sun filtering through its windows. It looks peaceful, half illuminated, half dreaming. He stops there just to watch. The home looks different, too, not brighter, not grander, but more alive. He notices how the morning light bends around its edges, how the bubbles from SpongeBob's sink float lazily toward the surface, how even the smallest things, like the kelp curtain at the window, move with purpose. And Gary realizes the world doesn't change when you slow down. You simply start seeing it as it really is. He listens for a moment longer. From inside, he hears the faint sound of SpongeBob humming a soft, cheerful tune carried through the water. There's the muffled clang of a pan, the squeak of a spatula, and the kind of energy that only SpongeBob has when he's happy to start a new day. The noise doesn't disturb the peace. Instead, it blends with it. It feels like warmth spreading through cold water, steady, natural, alive. Gary moves closer, each step leaving a curved imprint that disappears almost as soon as it's made. The sand here sparkles, brighter tiny fragments of shell catching the sunlight in flashes. He feels the rhythm of the morning around him, the steady beat of waves in the distance, the low hum of the ocean floor, the gentle whisper of currents passing through coral. He takes another deep breath, though he doesn't really need to. It's more like a gesture, a quiet moment of gratitude for the sea, for the stillness, for everything he's learned without words. He thinks of the night again, how it began in silence and ended in song, how the darkness wasn't empty but full of lessons too soft to be spoken aloud. Every sound, every shimmer, every slow step had been part of something vast and kind. And now, as the world brightens around him, he knows that wisdom isn't something you collect. It's something you become. The closer he gets to home, the more he sees how alive the morning truly is. A seahorse drifts by, carrying a small bundle of seaweed in its mouth. Tiny snails, smaller even than he is, crawl along the coral nearby, tracing their own paths. Each movement feels deliberate, yet effortless proof that peace doesn't mean stillness. It means harmony. He glides past a familiar patch of coral shaped like a spiral, its ridges glowing faint pink. SpongeBob once placed it there, thinking Gary might like a garden decoration. Gary never paid it much mind before, but now he pauses beside it, studying the way it curves. It mirrors the spiral of his own shell, two quiet shapes made by time and patience. He touches it lightly with his feeler, then continues forward, the morning light wrapping around him like a soft melody. The water thickens with color blue blending into turquoise, then into gold. Tiny reflections ripple across the sand. Each glint feels like a heartbeat, a memory of the night's wisdom shining in the daylight. He reaches the edge of SpongeBob's yard and stops again. The pineapple towers above him, its familiar walls glowing faintly orange through the water. He looks at it the way he might look at the horizon, as something that holds more than just space. It holds comfort. It holds connection. It holds home. Gary lingers there for a while, feeling the gentle vibration of SpongeBob's footsteps above. He imagines SpongeBob moving about, cheerful and bright, humming nonsense songs as he gets ready for work. Gary can almost picture it, the smile, the sparkle, the eagerness. It makes him feel something quiet but deep. Gratitude, perhaps, or maybe love. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken, because it simply exists, steady as the tide. A soft current moves past him, carrying a trail of sand that dances in the light. It swirls around his shell before drifting upward. He watches the particles shimmer, thousands of tiny suns floating through water. The whole world feels like it's glowing now. He closes his eyes for a moment, breathing in the hush. The night's lessons whisper again in the edges of his mind. The world doesn't rush to meet you. It waits, patient and kind. The sea doesn't demand motion. It teaches rhythm. And quiet isn't something you find. It's something you return to. He opens his eyes and feels the truth of it in his shell, in his steps, in the way he moves through light. The day has begun, but it doesn't erase the night. Instead, it carries the same softness forward. The stillness becomes sunlight. The patience becomes motion. The peace becomes a hum that never leaves. Or Gary begins to climb the small slope that leads to SpongeBob's front door. Each inch upward feels like part of a song, the steady rhythm of effort, of homecoming, of quiet persistence. The sand gives gently beneath him, releasing tiny bubbles with every press. He doesn't hurry. He doesn't need to. The morning waits for him, unbothered by time. The world around him flows with the same calm rhythm he carries inside. When he reaches the front of the pineapple, he pauses one last time to look back. The ocean stretches wide and shining, its surface glittering like glass. Somewhere in the distance, the reef hums softly, the echo of the night's voice, still lingering beneath the sunlight. Gary gazes at it for a long while. Then slowly he turns toward home. Gary lingers by the door of SpongeBob's pineapple, and the light filters softly through the round window above, scattering over the sand in delicate patches. It's warmer here, closer to home, the kind of warmth that doesn't just come from light, but from familiarity, from belonging. He pauses and turns his head slightly, gazing once more at the ocean beyond. It feels strange to think that just a few hours ago, the sea had been wrapped in darkness, whispering its quiet secrets to him. Now the same sea glows like glass, calm and open, its surface catching the first true beams of the sun. Everything looks sharper now, each grain of sand distinct, each coral branch gleaming faintly. Yet, inside Gary, there's still the hush of the night, that steady, slow rhythm that no brightness can dissolve. He moves toward the small opening beneath the pineapple door, the one SpongeBob built just for him. As he slides through, the sound of the outside world dims. The hum of water fades into muffled stillness. The soft interior glow greets him like a sigh. Inside, the air feels different, warmer, safer. It smells faintly of soap bubbles and sea kelp breakfast. And something else. That strange blend of SpongeBob's energy and care. Every surface feels touched by kindness. Gary moves across the floor, his trail shining faintly behind him like silver thread. SpongeBob hums in the kitchen, a bright tune that rises and falls in gentle rhythm. He's completely unaware of the quiet presence gliding nearby, yet somehow it feels like he's singing to him, not in words, but in spirit. Gary watches him for a moment. SpongeBob flips a kelp pancake high into the water, then catches it neatly in the pan. His movements are quick, cheerful, alive. But beneath that cheerfulness, Gary senses something peaceful too, a stillness that SpongeBob doesn't even know he carries. Because true stillness doesn't mean silence. It means presence. It means moving through the world without disturbing it. Gary slowly climbs up to his favorite perch, a small rock SpongeBob placed near the window. It's smooth and slightly warm from the filtered sunlight. From here, he can see the ocean outside, the gentle sway of the sea plants, and the soft motion of light sliding across the floor. He settles in, feeling the cool stone beneath his shell, and lets the world move around him. SpongeBob hums, bubbles rise, a few jellyfish float lazily past the window. Everything continues exactly as it should, unhurried, unbothered. And in that simple rhythm, Gary feels something like completion. He doesn't think in words, not the way SpongeBob does. His mind is slower, quieter, shaped by cycles and sensations. But in his own way, he understands. He understands that every journey, no matter how small, leads you back to stillness. That every moment of wandering is a circle returning home. He looks down at his shell, a spiral of soft pink and blue that glimmers faintly in the light. It's more than a home. It's a map of time, a memory of everything he's ever carried, every turn, every curve, a mark of growth. The outer layers tell the story of his latest nights of quiet currents, of lessons learned in the dark, of patience found in silence. The inner coils hold older memories of days spent beside SpongeBob, of sunlight and laughter, of the long rhythm of life itself. The shell is his journal, and he carries it always. Outside, the world grows brighter still. Rays of light stream through the water, bending around coral, painting the reef in slow-moving patterns. The glow touches SpongeBob's face as he turns, smiling to himself for no reason at all. Gary blinks slowly. He doesn't need to smile. His stillness is its own kind of joy. He feels a small vibration through the rock. SpongeBob's footsteps moving toward him. Then the cheerful voice breaks through the quiet. "Good morning."